It's my recent book right here. And it's called The Knowing. And this book took me quite a long time to write. And it was actually started by my Uncle Hank. And it was my mom who was constantly asking me to find Annie. Annie was her great-grandma. My mom is 80, and she said to me, you know, Tanya, you're the journalist. You should be the one doing this. All I had was a death certificate that said that she was a patient at the Ontario Hospital. And in 1930 is when she went into the Ontario Hospital, and the death certificate said she died in 1937. I didn't know how many children she had had before she had Liz, my great-grandma. We found out that Annie, her last name was Carpenter, and that she is from Petabik, Fort Albany First Nation along the James Bay coast. I found out so much more about Annie and her struggle, and what it was like for her living through those years of the Indian Act. The book is about my search for her and how she really represents, in so many ways, the lost children, the stolen children, our family members that are gone. Because it was kids at Indian residential schools that disappeared, but our people also disappeared in tuberculosis sanitaria. They disappeared in Indian hospitals and in asylums.
Talks a bit about reconciliation as well.
The TRC, part of the reason why it was written was to sort of give everyone else a push, right, to go out there and to do this work. In 2015, everyone was talking about genocide. You know, oh my gosh, they've used the word genocide. And so I actually wanted to write a book then. When I pitched Seven Fallen Feathers, my first book, to my publisher at the time, and my editor said, write Seven Fallen Feathers first, and then write this book. And then when Kamloops happened, it became apparent to me that it was all the same story. It's also interwoven.
Yeah, similar with would be my great-grandma as well. Because I grew up with my great-grandma, and she always told us stories about her mom. We don't really know. We know she spent time in a sanitarium. We know she was found on train tracks. Indigenous families, sadly, that, you know, this, yes, it's the children too, but it's also this missing and murdered epidemic as well.
It's all intertwined. And that's the thing that we understand as Indigenous people, but Canada doesn't really get that. I mean, maybe they're starting to get it now because we've been screaming about it long enough, and you know, how many inquiries and commissions have we talked about this and tried to show everyone the web.
And you also did a documentary?
I wanted to document this as well. You know, I was a journalist at Kamloops when the Lestwaywe, the 215, were first announced, and I thought to myself, I have to record this. So I came back a year later for the 1-year anniversary of Lestwaywe, and it was there that we recorded things. I mean, I just started to blindly, like, honestly start recording things because I knew I would use it at some point. And I also knew that there are people that will only watch the 4-part documentary series.
How long were you doing journalism? And kind of just the evolution of reconciliation. I mean, at one point you're in the Toronto Star. They've had some questionable stories in the past about Indigenous people.
Well, I was a journalist at the Toronto Star. I started in 1995, and being a journalist in 1995 was a bit different than now. There was not acceptance really for our stories. It got better once social media came onto the scene, once Idle No More, but it was still hard. It was still hard being a First Nations person working with all non-First Nations people. Well, I wrote Seven Fallen Feathers because I'd been writing stories about the 7 youth. And I started writing those stories in 2011 when I was a parliamentary reporter at Queen's Park. And so I wrote Seven Fallen Feathers in 2016. I wrote 2 books on genocide. And I also covered murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. I was a witness as well at the National Inquiry. I remember seeing we had an editorial at the Toronto Star that said, no, it's not genocide. And I couldn't believe it when I saw that. And it was really hard to be in that environment, you know, especially when you know that it is genocide, that we're still seeing the after effects. And so eventually there was a buyout offered at the Star, and I took it. I started Muckwell Creative, which is our a production company. We do documentaries and we do podcasts. And through that, I create my own newsrooms. And it was actually Murray Sinclair that told me, we all know what we need to do in our hearts and in our lives, and we just have to do it. And so getting that push out of the Star was good for me.
I just want to
Okay.
thank you for the conversation.
Oh, thank you.